first thing, now I'm more excited to find out how, like 2019, how much the Tessa brought up, like how much luck sometimes does it happen in business? I don't know if you ever hear of how I built this podcast. It's on NPR, and that's one of the questions he asks, like all his guests, like how much was luck, how much was everything else, but it started right before the pandemic. That's just like wow.
Yeah, I think so. Remote did start a year before the pandemic. You're absolutely right. And I don't think it was luck. I think there was some sort of intention behind changing the way global employment solutions are working and combining very innovative tech with amazing people. And so I think it was very intentional to start helping change this industry and to bring a little bit of light to this amazing opportunity to hire in global locations and not in a 30-kilometer radius. I think the fact that the pandemic happened really sped up our growth and created a hyper-growing year for us last year. And this has just sort of increased well into this year still, with Omicron, currently still going through fourth waves all over the world. And remote truly empowers businesses as well as people to open those global opportunities and to hire amazing talent and employees anywhere in the world. I think it brings forth a different type of economic opportunity as well, and it helps scale businesses. I, for one, has actually experienced this way before the pandemic as well. And I think remote is just starting to really take that innovative tech with real people building real relationships and partnerships around the world, wanting to impact both the personal, human aspect as well as the business aspect. So it's been incredible to be a part of it so far.
Well, this is great. Usually we'll give the intro, but I love this intro, Tessa, right? Maybe this is a good way to start a podcast, to just go right into it. This may be something that we could change. This is perfect. But so that was great. And I'd like to introduce Nadia. And I don't know if I pronounce how do I pronounce your last name? Just so I don't kill it. Sorry.
Yeah, it's Nadia Vatalidis. I'm married to an amazing Greek guy. I'm half Italian myself. And so therefore the Greek surname.
There you go. And you're the Chief People Officer for Remote?
I'm the VP of People at remote.com. And I initially started as Director of People a year ago. So it's been a tremendous year so far.
Wow. And so we welcome you to Happy at Work. And the whole ethos of what we're doing is empowering workers, bringing positivity and happiness into the workforce, and then bringing on really smart guests like yourself to share your story and share what your company is doing to help folks. And I'm glad you kind of launched into it and just spoke about it. And Tessa, maybe you could we could elaborate and get a little bit more into details, like what's going on at Remote.
Absolutely. So welcome, Nadia. So I would love to first get a better understanding of who you are. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to, what were you doing before Remote and how did you come to Remote?
Yeah, so I regard myself a little bit as rural talent. So well before the pandemic, I had my own little company here in South Africa in the executive search, coaching, and sort of HR consulting type business. I had one international client and the rest was all local, also within that 30-kilometer radius. And I was really struggling with the local economy at the time, being a very small business owner, was a little bit afraid of the future and not really sure what direction I wanted to go into. And I took a relatively big risk to join a company called GitLab, which is in the DevOps space, now 6 years ago, as a recruiter. So I literally took my career as a small business owner and managing director at the time back into a full-blown recruiter role at a hyper-growing startup. I took GitLab from 73 people or 70 odd people to 1,300 people over the period I was there. It was amazing growth. It was one of the first globally all remote companies in the world without a single office anywhere in the world. And their mission was all about open source. And I think the transparency factor was extremely lucrative for me. I love the fact that I was able to share what I was doing with the world and provide opportunities for small other companies to start up. Always been very passionate about how you're enabling others. And that's also why I started my career in recruiting and executive search and coaching. And so GitLab really resonated with me at the time. But it was a big risk. I got a question, I told Jack earlier, I got a question in the beginning, like, you're going to be working for a company, people that you've never met, that's allegedly a Silicon Valley startup. How are you going to get paid? Are you going to get paid? And you'll be working from home like a stay-at-home mom. So that's often the questions I got. And it spiraled into a full-blown career. It certainly set me up for success so nicely to join remote.com. I had a great experience at GitLab. I'm still in touch with them. I love their journey. I love following their journey. They've since IPO'd, which I thought was incredible last year. But I joined remote, especially because of the impact it's having on people in very rural locations. And I recognize that folks in locations like Kenya or Chile or Argentina or Philippines or Poland or in Austria is not necessarily gaining opportunities at Silicon Valley or UK-based or Dutch or German-based startups, and they sort of still stuck in their local markets. And we are impacting and changing that. We are bringing, tremendous opportunities for all this amazing people around the world. Some of them highly qualified, some of them incredibly resilient, and has this great, interesting experience and can bring such diverse creativity to organizations that I think some organizations hasn't even tapped into or hasn't even experienced. I think a lot of organizations last year were still stuck in this weird remote forced type headspace. And I think in 2022, I'm very excited about this year. And I think it's time to switch towards remote first, regardless of what business model you're going to be running. There's just such an incredible opportunity to use remote first business practices and what we deliver here and the opportunities we're creating in your organization to empower and enable folks all around the world to work for you, to grow into a new economy, to grow your organization, to scale your company into global markets that you never even thought, would be possible. And I'm seeing very large and very exciting organizations doing it. And I'm also seeing very small, very creative startups really tapping into it, off the bat. So our clients are from all over the world. Some of them are very small, some of them are very large, and they are truly starting to believe in what we're believing in, and that is the future of work. It's made up of diverse global employees, and it is tapping into these amazing, fresh economic environments and markets, and it's bringing a level of inclusivity and sort of cultural fluidity to organizations that hasn't existed before the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, I think maybe a strike of luck, but I think the intention was there to start changing the way global employment works.
So I have a follow-up for you. I'm really fascinated by the model of the international workplace. I teach as an instructor with Harvard professional development programs, but I'm also a professor at Halt International Business School. So at Halt, our classrooms are a microcosm of exactly what you're describing. We have over 100 countries represented in our classrooms of students from all over the world. So it's really, I think, wonderful to hear that through companies like Remote, really smaller companies or medium or even larger companies can really access talent from around the world. So what are the types of resources that you provide companies to help manage, an organization that's so diverse and wonderfully inclusive, but of course, along with that level of diversity comes a lot of challenges. So what kinds of resources do you provide to companies?
Great question. So firstly, I think if I had to start with just our Country Explorer page, it is filled with such tremendous information and provides companies sort of an upfront idea of what they could expect in different countries around social costs, public holidays, the legalities around all these things, right? But because we also have a public handbook, not only are we providing this amazing resource of information on how these countries work, but we also have great remote practices that they could copy and use and implement in their environments in a very scrappy, quick way. And so first of all, I think we're providing a lot of not just consulting sort of services, but also partnerships with a lot of our clients. I love speaking to our clients, and I'm not in a client-facing role. I'm responsible for our amazing employees and people all around the world internally. But I love speaking to some of our clients around the challenges they're experiencing during all this sort of evolving changes in the world. And it does keep changing. And I think with a lot of that change came a lot of probably fear, a little bit of concern around the future. So we bring a lot of stability to that. We take care of all the legally compliant aspects of hiring these folks. So if you think about the onboarding journey, thankfully, because of innovative tech and an amazing product company like ourselves, we can make that very fluid for an employee experience factor or people experience factor. And then we go into, the contractual side, making sure the employment agreements are accurate with the right information, having the necessary documentation available in our product for our clients, and for the people that they're hiring to know what they're getting themselves into, what are the things they can do and can't do. And we have a tremendous customer success team. We have a lot of legal expertise internally. And the fact that we own all 60 plus of these entities that we have in the world does add a completely different factor to employment services. There's no third party that we have to negotiate with in terms of the people experience or the human experience that we're trying to create, the client experience we're trying to create. Also, that very quick feedback to make sure they're fully supported and that they have access to information. Sometimes it's a very difficult query. It could be employee relations related, or it could just be a leave, parental leave query, etc. And we're absolutely, there for the journey and there for them. So I regard us really as a partner in the future of work and the way global employment solutions work.
That's great. When you say remote first, I know that sounds obvious, but it seems that there's a difference between some companies that are remote, but when you use remote first, how is that different?
That's a great question, Jack. I always think about like a list of things that's super important. So I'll start with documentation because it's one of my favorite topics around how it enables people and how it empowers knowledge in terms of just asynchronous and global work. So I'm very lucky to have a team across more than 8 different time zones at this point, just in the people team at Remote. I think globally at Remote, we have more than 16 time zones. I need to check that number. It could be slightly more or less, but we keep growing in new locations, so that keeps expanding. But if you have folks in all these locations, it's very difficult to work synchronously. You'll sit in meetings all day, every day, and potentially outside of your usual work hours. But if you start leaning into a documentation first approach where things are truly asynchronously available, where someone doesn't have to try and memorize a process or memorize templates or how to find it, where things are searchable, where things are available to all, it becomes this amazing source of great knowledge and information, and it self-enables people. So I think self-enablement is one of those key factors about remote work. You no longer have to rely on instant Slack notifications or instant replies. At Remote, we don't. We asynchronous companies. So if someone Slacks me or sends me a message through a messenger app at midnight, I'll be sleeping. I won't be available to answer them, but they'll be able to find a ton of information in our documentation. And I think, so that's the first aspect. The second aspect to documentation is async. We're still seeing a lot of companies that are sort of forcing this like meeting environment and having 3-hour meetings and working sync nonstop. I think it's starting to stall creativity. I think it's hindering the opportunity to go away after a 25-minute discussion and like jot down ideas and start thinking and actually working through a few solutions. Having a global team also means that you could be less inclusive if you have those meetings at a specific time every day or every week. And so also thinking around async plus time zone inclusivity if you're having folks around the world. And so I think documentation, asynchronous work, that already will impact a hybrid environment or a remote first practices. There are many aspects, there are many other aspects. So you need to have the right type of tools and ideally tech tools. And also knowing and not holding on to those because they will keep evolving. You might switch from a messenger system that worked very well in the office, it felt very formal and corporate, to something a little bit more tech friendly and a little bit more modern to work with global, global cultural workforce where that corporate approach might not be modern enough, might not be inclusive enough. And so I think the tech tools also matter in how you decide on choosing those. And providing availability to all of that, right? So if you're not supplying all these things, it's very difficult for people to just, have their own laptop and have their own headset and have their own second screen if they're working in finance, for example. So also supplying the right tools to use daily.
It's funny. I just had an aha moment when you were describing that, because I think what we have seen with the global pandemic is organizations and companies trying to take the culture of working in an office and just moving that culture into a Zoom environment or into a remote environment. And what you're saying, and what I just honestly realized in the last 5 minutes, so thank you, is that it's a different animal. We cannot pretend like we're still all working together in an office and like in this meeting culture, which actually I think for a lot of people is very draining, to sit on a Zoom call for hours and hours of, each day. That we have to realize that when we are in a hybrid or a remote type work environment, that it's a completely different animal, that you have different rules, and that you need to have different system and processes in place. So it sounds like that's exactly, when you describe the future of work, that's exactly what your company has done quite brilliantly. So thank you for that aha moment. But the question I had though is, so that's a huge culture shift, right? Like for organizations that have traditionally had an in-person work environment and workplace culture, that's a big culture shift. So my first question is really around, how do you help companies make that transition to remote, right? Because it is a lot more empowerment of the individual employee to know that they don't have to wait for their boss to give them an answer, but that they have more self-enablement and access and empowerment to find answers themselves and to be able to move forward in their work and not get stalled. So how do you help companies transition that kind of in-person culture to remote? And also, I'm really curious, in your role as the Chief People Officer, how do you manage a global culture, remote culture as well, right, for your own company? And what are some of the lessons learned that perhaps you go to your product innovators and say, I'm learning this and doing this ourselves, so we need to apply this to our business model?
Yeah, Tessa, so I'll start with the client side. There's so many facets to this. There's so many aspects that we sort of look into when we work with customers. We have such tremendous partners. So I'll start with that. We have partnered with amazing companies, both in the HRIS, ATS, talent, so resourcing and providing search services. So if companies doesn't even know how to go and find this amazing talent, partnered with organizations like that. And then there are way other partners that are a little bit more sort of very tech, very modern HR related products. And having partnered with these really enables those organizations to very quickly shift from a very traditional approach to a very modern approach. And you don't need to do a 360 type, change. You can do this in an iterative step. And I would always highlight and recommend never to just go from like A to Z immediately, and start with small iterations. So start shifting away from thinking that people have time for social connection if they're meeting all day, and rather start shifting to having intentional time for that, building intentional social connection sessions, and finding ways to go and create a new water cooler, right? Because there is no water cooler. There's no one drinking coffee in the morning or heating up food in the kitchen at 12 noon for lunch. And so starting to be very intentional around those things has been very helpful. And these partners of ours certainly helps a great deal with that. There are many. We've got an amazing list of partners on our website if you want to go take a look across the entire modern HR tech stack. And then further to that, at Remote internally, having transparency as a value has been core to our success. There's many other values that means so much to me personally, and all of those definitely impact our customers. But because we're so transparent about what we do and how, and the amount of information we're sharing with organizations, we're making it very easy to start shifting. For example, if you need to have a conversation with all your employees around, we're going to be converting you to employees, you're currently contractors, or during the hiring process, having those conversations about, we'll be hiring you through an employer record or global employment solutions called remote.com, and a step-by-step guide just to support them. So they have access to a ton of information. Our help at remote.com email or a message tool is also probably exploded over the last year, and we have such amazing people behind answering those queries live. So actual humans engaging with our customers and partnering with them. We've also found a great way to really support customers that are potentially larger, that have tons of people onboarding and high volume conversations, and literally taking them step by step through the process. Because we also have legal experts available to them, they can ask us very difficult questions or very easy questions. And so that supports them. And then furthermore, with moving a lot of our documentation to our product, so our product offering is quite exceptional. A lot of our documentation is available on our product. And so when folks are wondering what benefits we're offering in countries like Poland, they're able to access it and very quickly have that conversation during the hiring process or during the onboarding process. And so really mimicking exactly what we're doing internally and providing our customers that opportunity to do so externally as well with their employees. We love a people-first approach, so we're certainly selling that, and we hope that all our customers and all the businesses around the world will start shifting towards this big human people factor and not treat people as resources or bums in seats. I think that is, in the past, I think that's very much around the 90s and sort of early 2000s, but I think we're really past that phase of work and future of work. And then internally, I was very lucky. I walked into an organization, and I certainly chose this organization because of the changes it's making in the world and the opportunities it's presenting to amazing people in very rural locations. But we have two co-founders that truly live out our values every single day. And so these things aren't written on the wall, and then no one looks at them, or someone looks at them once a year and says, like, should we iterate on this? That's certainly not how it works. We have taken those values and we have operationalized it in everything we do. So from our hiring and the way we ask questions is very, very value-centric, to the way we onboard, to the experience we create. We've also used a lot of design thinking and product thinking around the experience that we're creating for people, and that longevity and that future and that sort of entire life cycle journey that we have for all our amazing people around the world. And then further to that, we have a public page around diversity, equity, and inclusion with a very strong lean towards belonging. Everyone can show up as they are and as they wish. So there is no corporate magic curtain. If you have interruptions in your day, kids, significant others, pets, family members, friends walking into calls, you don't need to apologize for that. That's absolutely normal. Rather just introduce us and let us wave to them and say hello. And so I think taking away the pressure of that perfection or, having to be all corporate, like boardroom style, is completely gone in this environment. And so it's extremely authentic. And when people can show up as themselves and be authentic, and they can also make really good mistakes that helps us very quickly iterate on something, or helps us find a bug, or helps us move forward with a different type of process in mind. So I think it's bringing a lot of creativity and a lot of diversity to remote. It's also providing an opportunity where everyone feels very safe to work in. We have we're currently tracking our diversity internally, and so we're starting to become very public about how we've grown and what is that looking like right now in terms of folks that identify as female, identify as male, identify as non-binary. And I think that also helps with attracting the right type of people to our organization. I think a hyper-growth tech startup is certainly not for everyone. I think there's certain competencies that you need, including a bit of grit and resilience to be successful in this environment. But it's certainly a very enabled environment. We provide a lot of things up front to create that self-enablement, warm feeling of belonging from the start.
But what I'm hearing, Nadia, is that Yob has to give you a raise. It sounds like you have a lot on your plate that you're doing. That's a lot of stuff that you're responsible for. Oh my goodness. I
have an amazing team, Jack. So it's not just
how
me.
big is your team? Because that's seriously, that's all. I'm listening to you going like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work, a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we have a large recruiting team. To go through hypergrowth, you have to build a really amazing internal recruiting and sourcing team. So we have an incredible team that looks after that, and they report into our senior director, senior manager of recruiting. And then on the people side, we have. I'll need to check because we've just had someone on board this week, but it's probably around 15 to 17 people at the moment. And I don't think we're going to expand the people team too much beyond that, but we do have all aspects of HR and people, right? So from things like total rewards, we have a team, including people analytics, we have a people operations team and a people experience team combined that creates people excellence. We have an amazing people enablement and partnership team, which also looks after our learning and development. And the documentation and knowledge base team also reports into me currently, and we're expanding that a little bit because documentation is so important at remote. And then furthermore, something I'm really going to be focusing on in this year, considering that growth we've had last year, is potentially looking at a vertical looking after wellness, DEI, and social connection.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you after that. Yeah. So it's because here in the States, and you operate globally. Here, so I could just talk to what I know here. Mental health issues, burnout, feelings of isolation, depression, off the charts. I mean, people are at each other's throats here in this country. It's really toxic in person, online. So are you finding that across the board with your different clients, or is it kind of focused in certain countries or it's worse than others? And then how do you help? How do you identify within your own organization or help your clients if somebody's working alone? After a while, are they feeling isolated, depressed, and are there ways to kind of rope them back in and give them the help they need?
Yeah, mental health is top of mind. I think more so in the pandemic, but it certainly should always be top of mind for any chief people officer, VP of people, or anyone in the people space, really. And a lot of our customers are certainly seeing that as top of mind, especially after 2021, leading into 2022. I'm currently reading a really interesting book about this, by the way, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it.
Oh, wait, yeah, let us know, because we always our guests always seem to be reading good books, so we keep track of it. Yeah. What do you have?
I have it on my desk because I have a poster to say, like, read it on Friday again. And this is my way of starting my morning and reminding myself what I committed to. So it's by an author called Naomi Shragai, and the book is called The Man Who Mistook His Job for His Life. It's like this. It's incredible. It's all about how mental health often shows up at work through what people experience in their childhood or as young adults. And so very often a lot of that leads into work-related problems or things that's showing up in their daily work or things that's really stifling their growth and opportunity. So I'm loving this read, and I'm sort of halfway through, and I'm learning a lot through the emotional connection that people make between childhood and at work. Now, surrounding mental health and wellness, we ran one of our first surveys, and people-specific surveys, sort of early last year. It's evolving now towards an engagement survey, so I think we're going to change it to engagement survey this year. We were just too early in our journey to call it an engagement survey early last year because we were 70 odd people. We're certainly leading to that now. But one of the questions we asked was around well-being and whether people are feeling burnt out. There was a lot of questions around that, and we certainly saw that a few folks were struggling with either being in lockdown, being very alone, and relying heavily on working relationships to feel engaged and feeling that there's a connection out there. I think being this global has been helpful. And I think a lot of the social things that we do has been incredible to those folks. But that doesn't fix mental health. So we decided to, in a very early organization and startup, to implement a wellness and mental health program. We used a vendor for that. We used Modern Health, and we specifically chose this vendor because they were available in so many countries in the world. So something else I'm finding now with vendors and looking into mental health and wellness, there isn't a lot of suppliers out there that can support, a global, amazing employment base or employee base. And so we started, really reviewing that. And there are tremendous startups in that space, by the way, as well. That's doing incredible work. And I think they're expanding globally now. So they also have great economic opportunities as we talk about this topic. But the sign up was incredible. And to see how many of our employees engaged on those platforms was incredible to see. I think when I checked the last time in December, it was sitting at 84%. And you could utilize this for coaching, for meditation, for joining different groups of people outside of our organization that's potentially going through the same type of thing that you might be going through. I think it's also been a great investment for neurodiversity. We have a lot of folks around the world that certainly classifies as neurodiverse. and has been diagnosed with something of that sort or in that spectrum. And so we also want to keep those folks really safe at remote. And so providing that, I think, is the right thing to do in 2021. We've certainly encouraged that to our customers as well. And I think we're trying to look at adding a partner on that, within that field as well.
Nadia, can I ask your opinion on this? So, we've done about 17, 18 of these types of things. And it's really wild because we started thinking, oh, we'll have a few meetings, and it's just blew up. And we have like a pipeline of a dozen more to go. And we're learning so much from the people we speak with. So much so that we thought, hey, maybe we could take all that information and help companies like distill, all the best ideas, suggestions from people like yourself, and then go to companies and say, hey, here's what we find that could help you out in terms of, recruiting, retention, making sure you don't have attrition, making people, looking after mental health. Do you think there's a market in that? Do you think that there's an interest in providing those? And I guess you would probably have to do not much in it, not maybe in the app, but this sounds like a personal thing. You know what I mean? Like once Omicron is gone, maybe in person or through a webinar. What do you think of that? Is that a worthwhile endeavor, you think?
I definitely think it's an amazing startup idea. I think it's a huge need. Just looking at the amount of outreach we're experiencing and asking for help, folks in specific, I belong to a few amazing communities in the people space. The amount of outreach I received for help and for just guidance around global remote teams, helping even from time zone inclusivity to the mental health aspect, to how we created belonging at remote. How do we make someone feel warm and welcome on day one? A load of paperwork isn't going to create that, and making someone do a bunch of administration isn't going to do that anymore. So it's all about that human experience. And so I certainly think it's a great startup idea. We're certainly doing a lot in that space right now. But yeah.
Because I don't know how it is in other countries, but here, you just feel it when you talk to people, you just feel, there's this like simmering, right, Tessa? Like, would you say like this, like simmering tension that's just out there. And then every once in a while you just see it blow up. And we're fortunate. We're so fortunate. Like we're speaking to such smart people all the time. Like, all right, wait a minute. So we're getting great ideas. And, but partly like by writing about, like we talked before the show. So partly that's what I enjoy is I could find it and write about, but then I figure, hey, maybe there's a better, another way. So
one of the questions I had, Nadia, and I know we're short on time, so I'm going to ask this one last question and then Jack can close this out. But you've talked a lot. I mean, first of all, it sounds like an amazing culture, and it sounds like the work that you have done has really enabled the organization to be very open, and for people to be very open about their vulnerabilities. And especially when you're thinking about there's upwards of 4 generations in the workforce right now, there's different perceptions as to whether or not certain generations feel comfortable sharing this type of information in a workplace, because as you said, in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, that was really discouraged. And there were a lot of privacy laws put into place to help protect people. And now we're asking people to be very forthcoming with diagnoses and, mental health issues, and to really be as transparent as possible. So how do you provide that psychological safety within the workplace so people do feel like their job is not going to be in jeopardy if they do become vulnerable or share or give information to their employer or even through your platform?
I think because the leadership itself, so even the executive team, is so truthful and authentic and transparent about what they're going through. So, I mean, it's not just the folks that are potentially parents that struggled through COVID, but also we had folks that became, that are single, that are alone, that was really struggling with those feelings in very high positions at remote. And being very honest publicly, sort of in a Slack channel about that, does create safety for others to speak up or reach out for help. A lot of that is still private and anonymous. We never expect someone to just share their diagnosis. I've seen a complete organic environment where we have a neurodiversity Slack channel. We also have an LGBTQ plus pad where folks just feel like they can speak about these things because we have transparency as a value and because everyone is showing up as themselves. I have to say, like, the key missing factor is obviously trust. If people don't trust the people that they work for, and if you don't trust the folks that you're hiring, then you will not create an environment where everyone can just feel like they can show up as themselves. So part of psychological is that one-on-one trust, but it's also the company trusting the employee and the employee trusting their leaders, their peers, and folks that they work for. We spend a lot of time educating and writing and documenting about these things. We've created a lot of guidelines around how you can create trust in your teams. What are the things, like one of the things that really means a lot to me and that I've been using a lot as a leader with my amazing team and with other teams has been like always starting a conversation to check in on how someone is doing versus jumping straight to the agenda. And that's still a habit I'm seeing in a lot of more corporate organizations, right? So like keep the agenda, work, and then, oh, how are you doing? How's things going? By that time, the person is exhausted. They need to get going with their work. They're not really going to share. So starting a conversation with just checking in to see how someone is doing is one of the leadership aspects. I think current leaders, it's, you know, that is hiring globally, that has a global workforce and various demographics should be doing, is having that personal and emotional connection with someone else. And often through that, when you start realizing what someone else is going through, you can offer the right support. You can reach out to us as your people team to let us help, to provide ideas, to provide support, to give different options without them even having to say who's going through it. But yes, I'm seeing such great organic conversations. We also have a lot of fun. So we have channels that are all about hobbies, so whether that's cooking or biking and sharing, like I'm about to update our S biking channel with how I mountain bike through a river in my vacation. So I think just having that opportunity to be that transparent and being that human in your leaders as well is probably what's sort of changed our environment to be this forthcoming and open.
That's so awesome. That's so great. So Nadia, I appreciate so much you taking the time and sharing everything and all the good work you're doing at Remote. And my own particular thing where I think is one of the best is that by going remote, you could just work from anywhere. And I think that just levels the playing field for so many people for so many years couldn't get access to really cool companies and great jobs just because of where they lived and they didn't want to leave their family and friends. And now all of a sudden that's possible. And to me, maybe because I've been a recruiter and executive search for 25 years, and like you know that, hey, Jack, I would like it, but the commute is too long. I can't do it. All of a sudden, it just changes. It's amazing. So I know there's a lot of other things, but particularly for me, I think that's such a game changer and it's not just in one country, it's globally. So it's just, and it's wild because you don't hear people talking about it. Like more people should be talking about what you're doing because it's really a revolutionary change in how everything works. And I think the more companies that adopt this process, the more people have chances to work wherever. And I hope you guys keep growing because you're doing great work. So thank you so much for sharing. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Jack. Our mobility team is very busy for our customers and for us internally. So we have a lot of folks that decide to relocate short-term and long-term all over the world, and we're able to support that as well.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nadia. It was wonderful to speak with you and get to know you and get to know more about Remote. So we'll be certainly sharing information about your company with all our other guests because it's really amazing.
Appreciate that, Tessa. Thank you, Jack.
Well, thanks. Thank you very much. Next time when we speak, I got to find out how it was like at GitLab before, like placing people remote before that was popular. But when we speak again, you guys say, because that had to be brutal. To call people up and say, have a job. Oh, where's it going to be? In your house? Wait, what? Because that, like, no one was really doing it back then. But that maybe, you know what? Maybe we could do that for another podcast if you like, seriously, to talk about stuff like that. Because as a recruiter, that had to be, at that time, really hard.
Sounds amazing. I'm in.
Well, thanks a lot. Well, take care. And you were awesome.